that her message has been so garbled. She surprised me by how unprepared she is.
Is Trump winning the campaign so far?
I don't think there's any doubt.
Now, you say you were a political prisoner. Did you ever feel worried about your safety? Was your safety ever at risk?
You know, the prisons here, I wasn't in a camp. I was actually in a federal prison. They're dangerous places. I was never scared. I was never scared when I got sentenced. But you have to keep your wits about you. You've got to be, you know, they've had stabbings, they have gang fights, it's flooded with this drug called K2. So you have to be kind of on your game. It's one of the reasons I think I came out more focused and really empowered than when I went in, because it's like when you travel to a foreign country. Here you're traveling to a foreign country that's a dangerous country. And you just have to be, locked in. If I had not been a naval officer back in the 70s or going to military prep school, I think it would have been quite difficult. I got through it, I think, with flying colors, but it's because of the focus.
There were reports that you had a prison consultant. Did you feel prepared when you went into prison?
Well, you have these advisors, consultants, and they just go through the modicum of what to expect. Some people use them, some people don't. We did retain one to use it. I think on the margin, I would tell people it's probably a coin flip. Did a pretty good job of kind of give us an overview, but it's you got to face the reality. You just got to see the reality of it.
Is Trump winning the campaign so far?
I don't think there's any doubt. I think you see the movement in numbers. It's all, can you close? Can you execute? I think President Trump's got 5 or 6 days in round one, but that this is going to go on for a while. You don't hire Mark Elias if you're not going to fight every step of the way. And that's where I think we are right now. I think President Trump has run a tremendous campaign, obviously, but now the last 6 days, you've got to bring all of that to bear to get this vote out. And it's not going to be easy. It's very doable. I think the numbers are cutting his way. And one of the reasons is I think that her message has been so garbled between the politics of joy and night falls on America that people don't really know what to make.
Has Kamala Harris surprised you in any way?
She surprised me by how unprepared she is. Like I said, I used the Bret Baier example in the press conference, but when I was watching Bret Baier's interview, and he said, and it wasn't a trick question, it was very to kind of show her commander-in-chief bona fides. Who's the greatest geopolitical threat to the United States? Who's America's biggest competitor or potential adversary on the world stage? And she immediately said Iran. And he goes, and I thought he was doing her a favor by saying, well, many people might say China. And she goes, no, it's Iran. Anybody that wants to be commander-in-chief that would sit in front of the American people and say that our number one threat, the number one geopolitical adversary competitor we have is Iran, doesn't understand the basics. And particularly if she's been vice president of the United States and in the Situation Room for 4 years, that's called a flat learning curve. I think she does this a lot on just basic policy. I think what shocked me the most is how little she knows and how she really can't walk through a coherent set of policy prescriptions that would kind of make the point that she wants to make. And I think that's why her numbers from the moment that she looked like the Messiah after they offloaded Biden, and at some polls she was 5 or 6 points up on President Trump, to now she looks like it's a dead heat to being down maybe 1 or 2 in these battleground states. I think it's purely because people are sitting there and going, I don't really understand what she stands for. In a presidential, particularly when her image is not formed to the American people, although she's vice president, most people don't know a lot about her. You've got to take 1 or 2 issues, and you have to drive this. It's very much President Trump in 2016 with MAGA, Make America Great Again, or the border wall, or bring jobs back from China. Pick 1 or 2 things at the most, maybe 3, but drive those home in every speech, wash, rinse, repeat. And you haven't gotten this, and I think that's why you had this pivot, kind of a hard pivot to fascism over the last week.
You've talked a lot about black men, about Latino men supporting Donald Trump. But what about white men? What does Trump offer white people in general? And what about those who are concerned about crime? You've talked about prison reform, But don't you think that more people, or what about those people who feel that there should be more people, criminals, put in prison?
I think, look, the First Step Act is not to make it easier for criminals. What they're saying is that our jails are full, and they should be full of people that do violent crimes or people that have behaviors that they can't overcome. Nonviolent drug offenders and some of these other offenders, you want to get them through the system, obviously pay their debts to society, but make sure they're productive and get them back out so they save their families, and then saving their families save the community. So, and I think President Trump, it's not that he separates out white from black, but I think it's the first time you're starting to see in a mass basis that African Americans and Hispanic men are really having a great awakening. And they're sitting there going, hang on. Now I understand what Trump's talking about. Now I understand these economic policies. Now I see what the Federal Reserve and the Biden administration has done to me economically, right? And so I think that is a great awakening. And I think that white working class, the African American working class, the Hispanic, I think they're coming together. This is what is driving President Trump's polls right now.
Should Labour staffers be campaigning for Kamala Harris in America?
Well, I mean, and the ones that are doing it are some of the more radical. I think they're drawn to those types of politics. And I realize in England they're saying you shouldn't do that, but clearly they're very drawn to those types of politics. We've had Nigel Farage over here a number of times. We had Nigel Farage in the 2016 campaign. I don't really have a problem if someone internationally wants to come over, maybe a staffer working on campaigns too much, but having somebody come over and say some good things about a candidate that would share their political philosophy, I don't think is the end of the world. And I think people will be open about that, as long as people understand that, hey, these people are not U.S. citizens and they support her policies on global economics or globalism. Like I said, Nigel's a kind of a populist nationalist. He's the hero of the Brexit movement, which is something the American right has touted for over a decade now as being kind of the precursor to a lot of President Trump's policy. So I don't really have as big a problem as some people have with that.
But there is a difference, isn't there? Because these are staffers from the official governing party who have been encouraged in some cases by Labour officials to come out and campaign and interfere in the American election. And there have also been reports that Donald Trump may declare war on Britain, metaphorically, to try and deal with Keir Starmer's interference in this election campaign.
We have a special relationship with the United Kingdom. We came through a very bloody 20th century as allies, as a strong bond of our country. At one time, we called you our mother country, although we did fight a revolution to kind of break off at the beginning of the rise of the empire. I think there's a very deep bonds of the American people and the British people. I'm sure President Trump won't go after any one political party. I know he loves England, Scotland. He owns Turnberry. I think if the Royal and Ancient put Turnberry back into the Rota, the Open Championship Rota, we'd get over a lot of issues. But no, I think that is, look, it's something that I understand people are concerned about. Maybe on the margins, it's maybe not great, but I don't think it has any big influence over the election, particularly given her campaign, I think, has such deep problems. I'm not sure that the Labor Party staffers can really help it here that much in the United States, and so it's not something that keeps me up at night.
What do you make of Keir Starmer's first 4 months as Prime Minister? I know you've been in prison and you may not have seen all of the reports, but his personal opinion ratings have collapsed in recent days.
As I said, when this went down, when the previous Prime Minister lasted 30 days, the United Kingdom has a massive kind of financial economic crisis. I don't think that anybody wants to really address. Outside of London, and kind of even the Tories thing of making it Singapore on the Thames, outside of London, you could argue that there are many places economically in England, the United Kingdom, that are third world countries as far as the economy goes. the United Kingdom has, I think, some massive financial and economic problems. I think that people have to focus on those problems, and that should be paramount. I think in a lot of regards, Labor, and I think the Tories try to play along with this, they're chasing marginal kind of cultural or social issues that don't get down to to really making a thriving economy where people can prosper. So to the degree that his poll numbers are dropping, I think what you have to do is focus on, and this is what I keep saying in the United States, after this election, with the debt ceiling issue, with the rescission of the tax cuts, President Trump's tax cuts, with this budget that could have another $2 trillion deficit in it, we're going to have our own kind of mini financial crisis starting in early 2025.
What do you say to those Republicans who have come out in favor of Kamala Harris? And how has the Democratic Party become the party of Dick Cheney?
Because Republicans and Democrats are kind of two old labels. Even progressive, then you have populist nationalist and populist nationalist policies, and you kind of have global elitist. The Democratic Party is a party that used to be a working class party. My family were Democrats. We were Kennedy Democrats. It was always the party of the little guy. That's totally shifted. It's kind of the party of the Hollywood elites. It's the party of the oligarchs in Silicon Valley. It's the party of the Wall Street barons. And it's of the credentialed class, people that in England would be the Oxbridge crowd, right? That's what we have here between Stanford and Harvard. And it's lost touch, I think, with working class America. So that's what I would compare it to. I think those Republicans, particularly the Dick Cheneys and the Mitt Romneys and all the Never Trump crowd, have a very similar philosophy to Hillary Clinton. On the margin, on some cultural issues, maybe like abortion and some other things, maybe it's slightly different, but they're neoliberal neocons, right? They believe in this American empire that is everywhere, fighting everywhere, trying to spread democracy, even with people globally, with people that maybe are not ready for it or don't even want it. And so I think Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney are very close to that kind of Bush Clinton, 25 years we went through, one family or the other, and it's not really that different, right? It's really about the same sets of policies. And so I think that's going to be something that's important in this election. And obviously, they're trying to carve off what I think is the Nikki Haley voter, 10% of those. And they think if they carve that off with Liz Cheney, that they can squeak out a victory.
Now, you say that you are a political prisoner. There have been other examples cited by Trump supporters as to what they see as the Democrats going after them using lawfare, Peter Navarro, even Donald Trump himself. Do you think that if Donald Trump does win the election in November, he should be authoritarian, he should be more authoritarian, and go after the Democrats, go after people who he sees as corrupt using the DOJ?
Well, you used the term more authoritarian. I don't happen to think he's authoritarian at all.
Well, should Trump be authoritarian?
No, I think what President Trump should be is himself. He's a leader. He's a very authentic. I say, and I said this in Vanity Fair, he's kind of, in the MAGA movement, he's kind of a moderate. I mean, this is a guy with a big heart. He really cares about people. Everything that he does, he's kind of looking at being balanced. His policies, look at his policies. Look at his economic policies. Look at his immigration policies. They haven't been overly tough. They've been kind of fair because he's a very compassionate guy. So with President Trump, it's just very simple. Your instincts are amazing. Just go with your instincts. Be who you are. And let the left, who you keep defeating, let them call you fascist. Let them call you nativist. Let them call you all this. I said racist. Once they start calling you those names, you know that they're losing. And they're only going to lose more.
Do you subscribe to elite theory? That's the theory that change comes from elites, and that actually these populist revolutions that we've seen in Europe have failed, whether it's Brexit, whether it's in Italy. Doesn't change come from the elites?
Brexit failed. Good God.
But even Nigel said it failed.
It hasn't gotten where it is because, remember, the elites in the Tory party, and I saw this when they first came over, they saw Brexit as a problem to be overcome, not an opportunity to be seized. Even in Italy, where we have a former populist that kind of maybe governs as a center-right conservative. This is all about a process. No, this new form of populism, although it has antecedents in Pat Buchanan and Ronald Reagan and other things, really started to come to fruition, post Sarah Palin, really with Nigel Farage in England and Donald Trump in America, right? We're at the very top of the first inning with this. Give it time. We grow in strength every day. Donald Trump was dismissed by the political class and the media class in January of 2021. He was basically driven from the temple of politics and said that you're going to be a non-person. Well, his movement said, we don't believe that. And so this has been a populist revolt to bring him back, and we're on the cusp of having one of the biggest come-from-behind victories in the history of American politics. So no, I think when we look at Europe and the United States, it's very early on. We're just now getting to populist policies, and I would point to people in this campaign where Kamala Harris is trying to out-populist Donald Trump in his economic policies. She's talking about tariffs. She's talking about tax cuts, following his populist tax cuts, whether it's tax on tips, a tax on Social Security, tax on overtime. They're trying to, she's trying to out-populist President Trump. I consider that victory when you start to have policy prescriptions that heretofore the people that oppose it the most understand to win elections that they've got to reach out to the people.
But the point I was making is that change comes from the top down, not the bottom up. You need to replace the elites.
I totally disagree with that. I think change is coming bottom up. The change of the MAGA revolution is a bottom up. We had no institutional support of the elites. Good God, the war room's been thrown off of every platform out there. Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, right? If you look at not just some of these other shows, but some of these other leaders, it's a bottoms-up movement. The power of the MAGA movement is something like the precinct strategy. This is the working class and middle class people saying, "Hey, I'm next man up. I've got to drive this. I can't depend upon that Bannon's going to be around or Trump's going to be around. I have to do it myself." So I think the revolutionary change in the United States is a bottoms-up, because you don't see a lot of it coming from the top down. Where you do is see Elon Musk, who kind of awakens to it, right? Or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who awakens to it, or a Tulsi Gabbard, who awakens to it.
Thank you for coming. I put I think Raheem Kassam has just put it up. The first statement I think I made from Danbury was about 4 weeks ago, September 26th. I said, victory is at hand. That you can see the collapse of this kind of phony campaign by Kamala Harris, the politics of joy, right? And she had nothing to back it up whatsoever. And you could see the beginning in the polls start to come our way. I'm very proud that the War Room has had President Trump's back, and it particularly has been the platform for the grassroots movement to have their voice heard. And I said at that time that with the hard work of the Get Out the Vote effort and the election integrity effort, that we were on the cusp of having an incredible victory that could actually be a potential landslide. Now we come to today, and I'm finally out of being a political prisoner by the Merrick Garland, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi regime. Okay, for standing up for my political beliefs against an illegitimate committee in the House that did not have a ranking member and did not have minority counsel. I went to a federal prison for 4 months. Now, Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris and Merrick Garland thought they were going to do two things. Number one, they were going to shut down the War Room and not have that as a voice for the grassroots movement of MAGA in this country. And number two, break me. Well, I think you can see today I'm far from broken. I've been empowered by my 4 months at Danbury Federal Prison. Why was I empowered? Because I was able to listen, to observe, and to learn from working class minorities, young African American men and Hispanic men, and yes, Puerto Rican men, about what their lives are and what the queen of mass incarcerations, which is what they believe that Kamala Harris is. She refuses, and she has refused as border czar, to commence any mass deportations of illegal alien or illegal migrant criminals in this country. And today, President Trump with the angel moms actually had to say, we need to set up a form of restitution to reimburse these folks. Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, as the border czar, has refused to do that and continue on the mass incarcerations. Now, President Trump, and quite frankly, with the visionary leadership at the time of Jared Kushner, President Trump came with the most significant prison reform bill ever created, the First Step Act. And today, 6 years after and 4 years into the Biden regime, of which Biden in 2020 promised and committed to dramatically decrease the number of incarcerations in federal prisons, and nothing has been done. Nothing has been done. You know, this is criminal negligence by the highest, at the highest levels of BOP, Bureau of Prisons, and the Justice Department. You have particularly minorities, African Americans and Hispanic men and their families being broken, rotting in federal prisons, when the First Step Act is very clear of what's supposed to happen, and all they do is get spun and spun and spun. The system is broken. Bureau of Prisons is broken. This is not about Danbury, not about the individual. Many good individuals are working at Danbury Federal Prison. The system of the BOP, the system of the Justice Department is broken. They have weaponized the Justice Department against a political movement, a conservative grassroots movement that's had President Trump's back, and from the dark days of February, March, and April of 2021 is on the cusp of the biggest political comeback in the history of this nation, led by grassroots people, everyday Americans, including, as we know now from the polling, and the reason I said we're on the cusp of a massive victory, she is failing to connect with minority men, Hispanic and African American men. Now, why is that? They understand what the scam is. They understand that this administration purposely let in millions of illegal alien migrants, illegal aliens, to drive down labor costs. The Federal Reserve said it from the very beginning. We're going to drive down labor inflation by getting more unskilled workers here and putting pressure on the lowest skilled sector we have. And they were successful, and they brag about being successful. The minority community understands that. They understand the scam and the con of what Kamala Harris has done. In addition, she has failed to do, for political reasons, the reason the First Step Act is not implemented among minorities is because Kamala Harris and Merrick Garland and Joe Biden in the White House and Nancy Pelosi understand it to be a massive political win for President Trump. And that's why they're failing to do it. They thought they would shut down the war room and take our power away. The show is bigger and more powerful than it's ever been. And please, it's not a podcast. We take the live streaming television show every day and the radio show, and we turn it into a podcast. So, my brothers and sisters at CNN, when you say the podcast number is off slightly, right? It hasn't. We were the largest podcast, but we're streaming. We stream on television, and we play on radio and online. And Nancy Pelosi thought a federal prison was going to break me. Well, it empowered me. God bless you. It empowered me. I am more empowered today, more focused today, sharper today, in better shape today than I've ever been in my entire life. So Nancy Pelosi, suck on that. The desperation of Kamala Harris and her campaign is obvious. They went from the politics of joy, and we were the first ones to call it, to darkness and night falls on America, and they pivoted hard. You know why? Her incoherent, explanation for what the politics of joy is befuddled everybody. So she had to go back to the same playbook. Trump's a fascist. His followers are not deplorables, they're fascists. That they're a danger to the country. Well, you know who doesn't buy this? Working class people don't buy it. And particularly African American and Hispanic men do not buy it. Had a great opportunity at Danbury, and I want to thank the Education Department of Danbury Correctional Institution for allowing me to teach, yes, civics and government. I had, I think, close to 100 students in 3 different classes. The majority of particularly the later classes were minority men, African American, Hispanic, lots of Puerto Ricans, lots of Dominican folks in the Dominican Republic. And if you had a chance to read Vanity Fair, the cover story on our populist nationalist beliefs, you can see that it talks about economics. And it talks about the way the system works, the financial system in this country, how it's inextricably linked to the political system. And you can't understand what's going on until you understand how the economy, how the Federal Reserve, how deficits, how they play into the politics of the day. That much that you see on television is just professional wrestling when it comes to politics and is not the thing itself. And I can report to you that these young men, most of whom are nonviolent drug offenders, that have, quite frankly, a lot of years in prison. These people came to this with a new awakening, and that is the awakening the American people are going through. The system is not only broken, the system is rigged against the working class of this nation. And I saw at Danbury that we're going to move past the politics of race with an intermediate stop in the politics of gender, which is being forced on everybody right now. We're going to get to what is important. And that's the politics of money. And once we get to the politics of money, there's going to be some fundamental changes in this country. I want to thank you folks for coming. I'm far from broken, and I appreciate you guys attending. And I will tell you, if President Trump's grassroots forces combine as we can combine right now, you're going to see unbelievable numbers next Tuesday. However, the Democrats are not going to give up. They just hired Mark Elias. And you only hire Mark Elias, who I think is the toughest election lawyer in the country. You only hire Mark Elias when you want to go to the mattresses. They understand they can't beat us at the ballot box. We're going to have a reprise of 2020, where they're going to try to do everything humanly possible to nullify Trump's election and delegitimize his second term. And I can tell you right now that the working class people in this country, the middle class people in this country that support Donald John Trump are not going to let that happen.
Hey Steve, good to see you. Tim
Miller.
From the Bulwark. I was listening to your Not a Podcast this morning.
Do you have the pukas on today, or we have the pearls?
I'm clear. No pearls.
Pukas or pearls? No pukas.
No pearls or pukas today. Sorry.
This is Tim Miller, one of my favorite guys from MSNBC and the Bulwark. Used to be the spokesman for the Republic. When I met Tim as a younger man, he was the spokesman for the RNC, the old RNC. The establishment RNC. The RNC of Mitt Romney, not the RNC of Donald Trump. Go ahead.
Long strange trip it's been, Steve. You said on your Not a Podcast today that the fight will continue from November 5th to Inauguration Day,
yes,
with January 6th being a key part of that.
Yes.
So are you planning an encore from the last January 6th?
No, Jamie Raskin. I think, Tim, what you ought to focus on is Jamie Raskin. Jamie Raskin saying right now, if they take the House by 1 seat, that they will go back to their committee report and they will say President Trump's an insurrectionist, that Bannon went to prison, Navarro went to prison, President Trump's been indicted, and they will sit there and go, hey, the Supreme Court may have issued a 9-0 opinion about him being on the ballot, but it doesn't mean we have to sit him as president. This is what they're thinking up right now. Nancy Pelosi gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine. She said her number one priority is to make sure that Donald Trump is not only not elected or re-elected president of the United States, but he never sets foot in the White House. Nancy Pelosi and Jamie Raskin right now are thinking about, and they're very open about it, of not certifying a Trump victory on November 5th. And that's not me
Yeah.
saying, that's Jamie
Yeah,
Raskin
what is it
saying.
the Kamala Harris victory? What are your plans for after November 5th with the Kamala Harris victory, the ballot box?
We're going to make sure that Kamala Harris doesn't win on November 5th.
Yeah.
We're highly confident. We've seen the polls, you've seen the numbers coming in. We're going to, look, we believe in the American system of democracy. We believe that, and the reason we like democracy, we're winning, right? And we're gonna win on November
Well,
5th.
so I do just wonder then, if you're
But-
reformed,
but
well, last one.
But you do agree with me on Jamie Raskin, that Jamie Raskin's already said they're not
I
gonna certify president?
don't agree with that. I do wonder though, you were teaching civics, you're out of prison. I wonder if you're any reforms, looking back on the last January 6th and the fact that you incited a mob that ended up resulting in police being injured. I just wonder if you reflected on that at all. Maybe you've reflected on that, and you might want to change your path this time.
If you look at what we said, is that as the states requested, 7 states requested, never got to.
Yeah, but you saw the outcome. Have you reflected on it at all?
A full review. This is because Vice President Pence didn't handle it correctly. This is because Vice President Pence did not handle it correctly.
So no change.
No, absolutely no change. For the simple reason is that we should have had a review as requested by the states for all 7 states at that time.
Okay.
Tim, thank you very
Just
much.
one question at a time, okay.
But Tim, if you want to continue
I have one more.
making
Has
speeches,
President Trump
television.
called you since you got out of prison? I got one more.
I don't want to talk about personal conversations, but we've had a chat.
You have talked with former President Trump this morning.
We've had a chat.
Have you talked about Election Day coming up?
I don't want to discuss what we're talking about, but
For-
by the way, he watches the show. He saw the show this morning. The show this morning didn't talk about my time in prison. What it talked about was 2 things. Number one, a massive grassroots effort that's underway that has to culminate on November 5th, particularly in places like Pennsylvania. It looks like max 15% of Republicans will have voted on the mail-in ballot early voting. Before then, we have to deliver 85% of the people to the polls next Tuesday. He understands that we are the focus and back of people like the Elon Musk of the world and the money he's putting in for his effort, and Charlie Kirk and other independent groups out there that are putting in, that we're driving and enlightening the grassroots movement of the Trump MAGA movement to show up next week. That's number one. And number 2, we had Bill McGinley and Mike Davis and others on to talk about the election integrity, the efforts that they're making, and quite frankly, places like Pennsylvania, that looks like the election administration is a little bit of a dumpster fire right now.
4 years ago, you urged then President Trump to declare victory on election night, when you knew all well that there was going to be a decent chance that we would not know because ballots had yet to be counted.
Hang on.
He went out and did exactly that. Have you urged him to do the same thing on this election night?
Hang on a second. When I said that 4 years ago, it was, why did I say that? Why did I say that? Because a guy named Mark Elias came up with a report that 2 individuals, Bill McGinley and Raheem Kassam, helped deconstruct in July of 2020, and he walked through how the Democratic Party was going to steal the election with illegitimate mail-in ballots.
They were not illegitimate ballots. They were mail ballots that American voters cast.
I
And
totally,
on election night,
by the
we
way,
knew
we
that
can
it was gonna
argue,
take a while to be
we can
counted. Have you
adjudicate
urged
that, hang
Donald
on.
Trump
We
to do
can,
the same thing this election
argue
night?
that, we can argue that. President Trump came up at 2:30 in the morning and talked, he should have done it at 11 o'clock at night in 2020.
Are you
Okay?
urging him to do the same thing?
I
on
am
this election
urging
night?
President Trump, if the votes come in like it looks like they're gonna come in, he should step up and inform the American citizens of exactly what's going on and not keep people in the dark like was done in 2020. So President Trump should step up and walk people through state by state of where these leads are and how these leads came about. We're
But
not
not
prepared.
declare
We're not prepared to have in the dark of night all the problems that happened last time. Okay, the 2020 election was stolen. Okay, I will never back off that.
And we know that you wanted him to stay on as president. We know that you wanted the electors
I didn't
from
want that.
multiple
What
states.
I wanted was
You wanted
I wanted the will of the American people at the ballot box to be effectuated. I want the will of the American people at the ballot box to be effectuated.
Thank you for watching this video. If you want to watch more content, please subscribe to our new GBN America YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.